just a very quick background in myself. I joined the International Marine Contractors Association last year. Started off as an attachment from the RN, and then by June I was full-time in that role. I'm an all-rounder in the association in the Secretariat in London, and that's based on my experience in the RN as a diver, as a ship driver. I've used ROVs, I've attacked oil rigs, attacked ships, defended them, etc., etc. So my remit is as an all-round role, but kind of I'm the boy who sticks his finger in the dike when the water's coming out, and we're trying to sort of just cover a few of the bases. I lead on ROV systems and remote systems. I lead on security. Of course, I'm dealing with the CMID project as it is now. And I also do DP training as I was a Navy instructor as well. So as you can see, I've got quite a varied remit within the organisation, which is, as you can see there, an organisation of around about 1,000 members now, primarily of contractors working in the offshore energy industry. So that's both the oil and gas and, of course, now renewables. We've got growing number of renewables members, and also we have recently started to encourage more suppliers to join the organisation. Now, you may well think that there was a bit of a conflict of interest there, a contractor using the equipment and a supplier trying to provide him with more of it, and of course there is a certain amount of potential for a bit of conflict there, but of course it's also important to know your enemy. So having the two in the same room, often we're able to overcome some of the, not necessarily the commercial aspects of the relationship, but certainly the understanding of who needs what, where, when and how. Similarly, with the training providers that we have as members, they are trying to, of course, sell courses. So our contractors want to make sure that the courses they're delivering are worthwhile, is what they want, and equally the training provider doesn't want to waste money and he wants to attract new customers, so of course there is a good synergy there. And finally the client, the dreaded client, the oil and gas majors or the governments or whoever the contractors are working for, they too are part of this sort of IMCA framework. So as I said, there's around about just over 1,000 members. The way that it's managed is, it's not a particularly brilliant slide, apologies for that, we're just updating things at the moment, and in fact the whole of the structure is being updated as we speak. We've had having a change of management, so we're currently just awaiting the announcement of the new technical director and the new chief executive, who will be joining shortly. And also the IMCA Council, which is kind of the VPs, the presidents of our major members, Subsea 7, Technique, McDermott, that sort of level of company. They're the ones who are setting the strategy for what IMCA does and how it goes about interacting on behalf of its members. The day-to-day management of the organisation is through the overall management committee, so pretty much everything that we push out in the form of publications or guidance or make arrangements for discussing with other industry bodies, it goes through the IMCA. Can I just get a quick show of hands, who's heard of IMCA? Okay, so around about half, so bear with me, those of you who do know about it, and for those of you who don't, obviously I can just provide a little bit more flesh on the bones. There are 6 divisions within the organisation, 2 core activity divisions, so that is essentially what is common to everything, and this will include the competence and training division, and the other core division is the safety, environment and legislative or legislation division. So those 2 areas, those 2 divisions concentrate on issues that are common to all the activities. The activities themselves are covered in technical divisions, and they are, as you can see on the slide there, remote and ROV, offshore survey, marine and diving. IMCA started out as a marrying, if you like, of an association, the DP operating Vessel Operators Association, and also the Association of Diving Contractors. So we were very focused on the diving world, and that is in fact the one area where we still actually issue accreditation from within IMCA itself, and a bit more about that in a second when I talk about how the relationship between IMCA and IMS has developed. It is an international organisation, and the input and output to and from the sort of central hub, if you like, the council and the OMC are through the sections, the regional groups. So there will be representatives out in the regional areas who provide that input. I think it's sort of fairly similar to how IMS is structured in terms of that reach to the areas where there is marine activity, particularly obviously offshore energy activity. That's where we have our section. So Middle East and Africa, Europe and Africa, Middle East and India, Asia Pacific, Central North America and South America. And each one of those areas has a chairman and a vice chairman overseeing the input that IMCA can provide, and there are also subcommittees for the different divisions that we've had in the main part of the organisation. So in terms of its footprint, it is global. In terms of its size, as I said, it's around about 1,000 members, and that is certainly after quite a few withdrew over the last couple of years with the downturn. But we're still getting people joining all the time. And in terms of size, we account for around about 350,000 people in the offshore industry, and I can't really put a figure on the global worth of all these companies, but in terms of a business sort of exchange, it's in the region of $150 billion a year. So it's quite a big chunk. And for that, we do have representation at IMO as an NGO. So we represent various areas of activity, as I said, and this is the bread and butter of what the Secretariat does, which is based here in London. The Secretariat consists of 29 people. Actually, 2 of those are based overseas, but the rest are based in Victoria. So whilst I'm standing here as the IMCA representative, of course I'm not. I am just a member of the Secretariat. The IMCA itself is its members, its company members. So I just want to make sure that that was clear. The 26 or 27 people who are based in London include the Chief Executive and the Technical Director, a Technical Manager, 8 technical advisors for the various divisions, and a supporting staff of around about 12 people doing finance and producing the publications, doing the membership, doing the sort of nitty-gritty of keeping things on track and acting as the oil in the wheels of the engine, if you like. So how do we interface with people? Well, I mentioned the promotion of cooperation between industry bodies, people who are involved in the efforts to recover energy from offshore locations. Clearly, we have a very strong liaison with oil companies. We are in fairly regular contact with the IIMCA organisation. That's the Oil Companies International Marine Forum. They do a lot of work on behalf of the various oil companies around the world. So it's very obviously key for us to keep in touch with that body and those organisations. Do a lot of work with governments. So, for example, earlier this year, I arranged a meeting between our technical director Jane Bugler and the director of policy prevention in the US Coast Guard in Washington to go and talk about quite a few of the issues that have been teasing our members' minds out in the Gulf of Mexico. Things like oil well intervention for ROV systems, for new DP regulations that the US Coast Guard are thinking of introducing, and other such matters which are obviously relevant to our members. So we do actually get quite a lot of requests from government bodies to supply information and provide support and guidance when we have to. Other trade associations, already mentioned IIMCA, but the International Association of Drilling Contractors is another sort of major relationship that we have, because of course our contractors work for the drillers. So again, there is a lot of synergy between all these organisations that are working out in this very complex and hazardous industry. I say hazardous, you will be obviously aware of the things like the Macondo incident in the Gulf of Mexico a few years ago. You may have seen the DMVGL report on the Deepwater Horizon and what caused all that catastrophe to happen. And we can trace all those faults, if you like, through the old Swiss cheese model. All the holes were lining up to make sure to cause this catastrophe, which is very similar to Piper Alpha in the North Sea, which we experienced ourselves all those years ago. So you can see how things keep on repeating themselves in all the areas of the offshore industry. And I dare say that the same thing is starting to happen in the offshore wind sector, the renewable sector. There are lots of questions as yet unanswered about how that area of energy production will be managed and how guidance will be developed. So we've got a lot of work to do there as well. What's it about? It's the health and safety primarily. That's really what we do. We want to make sure that operations are conducted safely, but there is a sharing of technology. We never set a best practice standard. We're always aiming for good practice. That's to account for areas where clearly best practice cannot be achieved for various reasons. So what we're trying to do is raise the bar for everybody rather than set a bar at a high standard which nobody else can get over apart from a few select people. That does mean, of course, that a lot of people ask us to write not just guidance, but actually regulations, and we're forever sort of having to pass the message back that we're a trade association, we're not a police force, we don't enforce anything. The members themselves are the ones that self-regulate, and this is why we're trying to promote a self-regulatory environment rather than having governments coming in and legislating, as we've been seeing in the Gulf of Mexico, where it isn't actually quite as helpful as it might sound.
Chris, 5 minutes, please.
Sure. So, I mentioned self-regulation, and part of that is the Common Marine Inspection Document, which I'll move on to now. Having equitable contracts, of course, is very important. Making sure people can move around the world doing various work where they have to, and resolving industry issues. So I'll skip that slide and move on to the CMID itself, why we had to do it. The primary reason was that the industry wanted us to. OVID, the Offshore Vessel Inspection Document, which is what OCIP uses for their oil tankers and offshore vessel surveying now, that was introduced because of the fact that there was not an accreditation process in place for vessel inspectors. Of course, it's a modern business expectation that anybody doing assurance activities now has a level of due diligence placed over them to make sure that they can deliver things with competence and effectiveness, and actually that there is a quality of the product that they're doing. We had to improve the utility for vessel operators as well. So we had to make sure that it was updated, so the actual document itself, as well as accreditation of vessel inspectors, has also been updated. And the reason why I was on my minutes today was because we just released version 9 this morning. And of course, like with all software tools, there are glitches which I've been trying to sort out. Why we had to go and come and seek assistance from IMS is because, as I said before, IMCA, generally speaking, does not accredit anything, although we're asked to do. So we were looking for a partner within the marine community who would be able to come and assist, and who had experience in already having accreditation schemes for various different types of marine activities. And of course, IMS has been doing that for quite some time. So it made obvious sense to us to ask IMS to help with this accreditation process. This really started last year. I came in, as I said, in the middle of last year to take over the project, and I've been working with Mike and Hilary on this. And we came up, or I came up with the name of Project Tradewinds to bring together both the objectives of the accreditation and the updating of the CMID system itself. What about the standards? Well, the problem as to how to accredit people without putting them through a course which we were running, which we're not. There are inspectors already out there, so they've been doing this work for quite some time, and clearly most of them were doing pretty well. So that was how we started off with our concept. But what we needed to do is to design something and to get them into a system which was able to recognise their competency. So this required some form of measurement of existing competence, and it had to be a transparent process. So there needed to be a means of feedback to people who had failed to make the grade and actually get accredited. So that was something that I know Mike had to work quite a lot on in getting the accreditation level right. We wanted people who had both the qualification but also the experience, and that had to be demonstrated through an evidence-based process. So we worked on a tool, a form that was able to be scrutinised by members of the panel who were going to be set up within IMS to look at the applicants to make sure what they were sending in terms of previous reports, in terms of their qualifications, their experience. That form was used to sort of weight the different elements of their application. So, for example, safety elements were given a higher priority. Auditing experience, of course, had a higher priority, a higher weighting within the accreditation process. But the emphasis was on the applicant actually providing sufficient evidence for panel members within IMS to be able to award an endorsement of CMID Vessel Inspector. So the project's aim was to enhance the performance of and status of the vessel inspectors. That was the actual project's aim, and then a series of objectives: developing IMS screening mechanism for the AVIs, delivering training. So whilst we haven't really quite started that yet, the first accreditation course was last Thursday up in Aberdeen, and in the future, once we have established a continuous personal development model for vessel inspectors, there will be workshops, they'll be able to attend industry-related activities to gain points in order to revalidate at a future time. So the CPD element of this accreditation process is absolutely vital, and we certainly echo what Mike has said in terms of how important that is in the modern day world for vessel inspectors. Hillary's taken over as the training manager, the scheme manager, and part of that is also looking after the training aspects as well. So thank Hillary very much for making sure that, for example, last Thursday we had 15 people turn up for the first course, which actually went quite well. And thanks to IMS for administering the whole scheme itself and also setting the standards. So that is something that IMCA has very much appreciated, and what we're going to do in 18 months' time, we'll audit the scheme. We'll find somebody with the credentials to come and audit it, the whole process, both the accreditation and the actual CMID itself, the document itself, to make sure it has actually delivered what it was supposed to do from the beginning. So we're going to check ourselves to make sure we're not just listening to our own plaudits. And that's it. Any questions, please?
We're a bit over time, but anyway, one question? Anything you want to ask? Chris is here. I think you're here all day, Chris? Or you
Till lunchtime.
Here till lunchtime, and he's around at dinner tonight. So, one question at the back there, Nick. Is it Nick?
Yeah, sorry, Chris. Do you have much interaction with the nautical institutes on your vessel operations?
Yes, we do. Yes, we are part of the DP training executive group. So, and with other areas as well, we liaise quite heavily with the Nautical Institute, yes.
Okay, one more.
Ocean Dynamic Surveys. Will version 9 be launched?
Today.
Today?
Yeah.
So we'll be able to go online tonight and have a look at it?
Yep.
Okay. I hope I see you tomorrow.
You know where I am.